Hey there, Raiders. Happy World Read Aloud Day. Today, we join millions of readers and writers in over 170 countries, and we celebrate our freedom to read and write. And today, we have a very special treat for you.
Our treat for today, my friends, is author coming to visit us online, as you can see. Her name is Yolanda Ridge. Ms. Ridge, good morning or good afternoon.
Good
Good morning.
morning.
Ms. Ridge, my fellow Raiders, she writes for young people, so she's used to writing middle school material like what we usually read. Has written everything from poetry to scientific articles full of words that we cannot pronounce. She is the 2018 Chocolate Lily Award shortlisted, and so I introduce you to Miss Yolanda Ridge. Miss Yolanda Ridge, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me into your school. It's so great that we can do this virtually, and I'm going to jump into reading aloud because that's what we're here for. But I just wanted to give everyone there an idea of where I am versus where you are. So I printed out, hopefully, I can get this in front of the frame, a picture here of North America. And hopefully I've got this right. You guys are here in El Paso, right at the border, Mexico. And I am up here in Canada, right at the border of the United States. Just by show of hands, has anybody been to Canada? Couple people. Okay, the people who have their hands up, have you been to British Columbia? Okay, so that's the province. Oh, it's so backwards for me. That's the province that's over here, and that's the province I'm part of here in Rossland. And when I was doing the map, I looked at what the route would be to get from Rossland, BC to El Paso, Texas, and it said it would take 26 hours in a car. And we would have to go through some winter driving conditions. So, so we're pretty far apart, and I'm really glad that I can connect with you this way. So the book I'm going to read from today is one of my latest, called Evolution Under Pressure. It's a nonfiction book. I write both fiction and nonfiction, but I've started to write more nonfiction lately. And this one draws on some of my experience because I used to work as a scientist before I started writing. So I will just jump right in for World Read Aloud Day and start with the introduction. Have you ever looked in the mirror and wondered how you could possibly be related to a fish or a spider or even one of those blobby looking amoebas you've seen swimming in pond water under the microscope? Maybe you've watched your brother eat a banana and thought he looked a lot like a monkey, or tried to follow your sister up a tree and wished you were more of a monkey yourself. If every creature on Earth came from the same ancestor, why are we all so different? If we're all related to one another, why do some of us thrive in the water? And how come only some of us can fly? Each of us has our strengths and weaknesses, which allows us to coexist within the same ecosystem. We can't all live in trees, for example, or they would get pretty crowded. But only humans have figured out how to exist in almost every part of the world, even in space, by doing things like cutting down trees, growing crops, building cities, and inventing new ways to travel. We're the only ones who've altered our natural environment so it's better suited to us, rather than adapting to make us better suited to it. How does this affect plant and animal interaction? What impact does it have on our shared environment? Understanding what evolution is and isn't is helpful in trying to answer these questions. The theory of evolution based on natural selection is a good place to start. But to really understand our role on Earth and the effects humans have had on the evolution of all other species, including ourselves, we can also look at the idea of not so natural selection. What do animals like hornless rhinos, porky pigs, peppered moths, and anole lizards have in common? They're all good examples of how hunting, farming, inventing, and even moving to the city can have a huge impact on other animals. I'm going to mute myself and answer questions at the end, but I'm going to keep going forward and read a couple other sections aloud for you before we get to questions. The book goes on then to explain what natural selection is and not so natural selection. And it starts with a picture you might have seen before of DNA, talking about how DNA is the stuff that's inside every single cell that has all the instructions for how living creatures grow and thrive and actually reproduce. And it's because of changes in that DNA that we are different from each other. And we get things like this, the tree of life, where we're all from the same ancestor, but different. Now, talking about natural selection, I use an example of a giraffe. Like, here's our beautiful picture of the giraffe. I didn't draw the pictures, by the way. I should give credit to Dane Thibault. He did the illustrations and did a great job. But let me just read you this brief passage about how natural selection works. And we're going to talk about how the giraffe might have developed a neck that looks better suited to mythology than life on Earth. During evolution, the ancestor of what we now call a giraffe had a baby with a longer neck than her parents because of a random gene mutation in the DNA. We're going to call this giraffe Jandy. Luckily, Jandy was born in an environment with lots of tall trees. Since Jandy's long neck allowed her to eat the leaves at the tops of the trees, she had lots of food compared to her competitors. This made her extra healthy and able to produce many offspring. And Jandy's long neck gave both her and her calves a better view, not just of the beautiful African landscape, but also of dangerous predators with a craving for giraffe meat. Both of these advantages helped more of Jandy's family survive and then have more children with long necks, or perhaps even longer necks than their parent. Evolution is a process that takes time, so Jandy may have been the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of the modern giraffe, which sports an even longer neck than she did. So that's an example of natural selection, how a giraffe ended up with a long neck because it helped it thrive better in its environment. The next part of the book goes on to talk about examples of not so natural selection, and this is when we start talking about the rhino. And through natural selection, the rhino has a horn, and the horn helps it to defend its territory against other rhinos. It helps it dig into the ground and get water and plants. So natural selection has given rhinos these beautiful horns. Problem is that people have become interested in these horns as well. And what do we need rhino horns for? The short answer is nothing. I hope I haven't left you guys. I can't see your beautiful picture anymore. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the question is, why do people get involved? What do we need horns for? The short answer is that we don't, but the longer answer is that in the past, people have used ground rhino horn to cure everything from fevers to snake bites to headaches. And even today, it's used as a potion to treat cancer or help people reproduce. So this huge desire for rhino horn has led to poaching, an illegal form of hunting. And even though rhino hunting is illegal in most countries, close to 10,000 African rhinos have been killed by poachers in the last 10 years. That's 3 rhinos every day. 3 of the 5 rhino species are now considered critically endangered, meaning that they're at extremely high risk of disappearing from the wild. The Javan rhino in Indonesia is one of the rarest large animals on Earth, with fewer than 80 left in the wild. Now here comes the good news and the not so natural selection part. Thankfully, nature is fighting back against poaching. If a rhino has no horn, there's no reason for a poacher to hunt it, right? Thanks to a random spelling mistake that happened when the DNA of one rhino's instruction manual was copied. That's exactly what happened. And this mistake happened at just the right time and in just the right place. If it had happened earlier, when humans weren't interested in rhino horn, the rhinos wouldn't have had an advantage. In fact, they would have had a disadvantage over rhinos with horns because they couldn't protect their territory or dig for food and water. But with poachers, the rhino accidentally born without horns became the lucky ones, like winning the lottery. Having horns went from being an advantage to a disadvantage because rhinos now live in a different environment, one that contains poachers. So rhinos have started climbing back down the evolutionary tree as a way of adapting, not to nature, but to us. So the book goes on to talk about other examples like that, but that gives you a taste and lets me read aloud to you. I'm going to send it over to you now to see if you have any questions for me.
All righty, Ms. Ridge, thank you so much for the information. And, it's interesting how, as young students, you see giraffes, you like giraffes, you go to the zoo, you see the rhino, but those little known facts about, how we as people can have a negative effect on these animals that we take the kids to cherish, to see, to enjoy. It's interesting how you put the not so positive side out there as facts for us to always take into consideration. And so with that, I think we have a few questions.
My question is, what book are you most proud of?
We can hear you. Can you unmute yourself? Please.
Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it? Sorry. Thank you for that great question. It's a tough one to answer. Usually my favorite book is the one that's just been published. And the one I just read from Evolution Under Pressure has been recently published, but this one also came out this year. And I'm very proud of it because it's a fiction book. So the story is not real, but it's based on my son who joined the hockey team here a lot later than some of his peers. In Canada, hockey's like a huge big deal, right? So everybody plays, but my son didn't. So he joined later and he wasn't as good and he had to work really hard to catch up. And this story is about a boy who is the same situation and he starts making wishes on a bobblehead doll so that he can play as well as his classmates. And I don't know if there's any hockey fans out there, but the bobblehead doll is Carey Price and he's a goalie. So it's a fun book. And I guess I'm proud of it because it was based on my son. He was a good inspiration for me.
Mijito, go ahead and ask your question.
Christian.
What was the hardest book to make?
He was asking what was the most difficult book that you had to write?
That's a good question. And I'm just going to come out for 1 second of the screen. My very first book that was nonfiction was this book, CRISPR, A Powerful Way to Change DNA. And it's about gene editing. So I talked a little bit in my read aloud about genes, and that is really what I studied in school. But I went to school for 16 years to study genes. And in this book, I tried to summarize everything in like this many pages for, people who didn't really know a lot about science. So it was very, very challenging to write, but also really fun. That's what I like about writing nonfiction is that you have to take lots of complicated information and kind of try to narrow it down, but still make it true.
Okay, we have a question on the corner over here.
Yeah, I just saw with the books with the science guy. That's what he said.
We have a question on this side over here. Go ahead, sir.
Why did you become an author?
That is a super good question, and it's a bit hard to answer. I've always liked to write, like that fabulous introduction. I was always writing when I was young, your age and younger, but I never really thought I would be a writer. Just never occurred to me that I could do that as a job. And then when my sons were born, I have twins that just turned 18. When they were born, I couldn't go back to my work as a scientist. And I was reading them a lot of books. That is one way to get twins to sit still at the same time, or at least it was for me, is to read them books. And I was reading a lot of books and I thought, well, maybe I'll give it a try and write some of my own. And that's how I started to realize that I could actually have a job as a writer. And I've been doing it ever since.
Miss Ridge, so 16 years, I see a lot of the faces on these kids. When you say 16 years of school, they're like, we're barely at number 6 or 7. And so in that being said, can you recall back to your middle school days, and was there one teacher that made an impact in you, and why, or you know, had a profound, your light bulb went off, pow?
I did. When I was your age, I traveled a lot. So my parents would take me out of school and we would go traveling, not for very long periods of time, but for long enough that my teachers felt like they needed to give me some homework to do while I was traveling. And there was one English teacher who gave me the job of keeping a journal while I was traveling. And I had kind of done a little bit of Dear Diary kind of writing before, but to write a journal that captured every day of my experience traveling really showed me the power of writing and capturing those moments. And I didn't want to show her because I was so excited. I just wanted it to be my thing and something that I was happy and proud of. But she did end up reading it, and I guess she had to because she gave me a mark and really encouraged me to keep writing. So that was really helpful on my journey.
Thing. Any other question? Go ahead, Mijo.
What's your favorite genre of literature?
Was it about the genre of literature?
What's your favorite genre?
Well, when I'm reading, I like reading psychological thrillers. So I like reading books where there's a bad guy and they did something and we've got to figure out why. Kind of not so much the who done it, but the why done it. Like, why did someone do something kind of evil like that? And as my kids are getting older, and I've written quite a few books now for like middle grade students, I'm starting to think about trying to write one of those books myself. But I don't know, maybe it'll ruin my experience reading them. That's my favorite genre to read.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that question.
Ask again, Evan.
Okay. What's the proudest article of that book is that was?
I don't think so. Oh, could you ask her again one last time?
Maybe go closer to the microphone.
Mr.
What's the proudest article of it that was?
That's the hardest article in the world.
Oh, what is one of the hardest articles that you'd had to write?
The hardest articles I've had to write. I think what I find somewhat easy is when I'm writing science, because it's very based on fact. And what I find difficult is when I have to start writing things that are more based on opinion and trying to make that as fair as possible, trying to make sure I've seen the situation from all different sides. That's a great question. I'm actually going to be thinking about that question a bit more too, because that's a good one.
Okay, who is it? What?
Who's asking?
Me.
I was wondering, have you ever written a book that's come from like not like a deeper mindset or like a darker mindset? Like, has there ever been like a book you've written out of a difficult time?
Oh, good question, Crosby.
Okay, question.
That is a very good question. I think that almost all of my fiction books, so I've written 4 fiction books, come out of some experience that was a difficult time. Because, you know, a good book is always about a problem and a character that's trying to solve a problem. So I think that they've all come from an element of truth of something that's been difficult for me. But having said that, I have not yet really tackled some of the very difficult things I've gone through. And I am being encouraged by my agent, that's who the person who sells my writing, to do that a little bit more. So I think they say that that really makes for strong writing when you can really go into something that was hard for you. So that's also a really good question.
I think we have room for another question. Go ahead and ask, Mijo. You in the corner?
Who inspired you to be an author and write all these books?
So my favorite author growing up, I don't know if any of you will know her, but she's still writing books, is Judy Blume. And she wrote a book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And it was about a girl who moved into a new town, and she was the new girl. And I, in addition to traveling a lot, I moved a lot. And when I read that book, I was like, wow, this person understands me. And I think that really, Judy Blume's had a great career, but that book in particular really inspired me to write and share kind of my experiences, even if they're fiction, with other people, because we're all sort of dealing with the same things, even if it looks different on the outside.
All right.
Interesting.
I think, we still have a little bit.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Please write away.
Oh, what keeps you motivated to keep writing?
Well, it is actually, that's also, all these questions are so great. So I thank you very much for asking them. It is actually one of the hardest things about writing is that you have to force yourself to do it, right? You're not getting paid to be at, my son works at the library. He's paid to be at the library. He has to be at the library, and that's just the way it is. I have to force myself to sit down and write, and only I know if I'm doing it or not. So it actually does take quite a bit of motivation. So I always say that you have to love doing it, and I do love doing it. So that really helps. But also after you start writing a few books, you do start getting deadlines, and your agent wants things and your publisher wants things. And so at some point you do have to keep writing. You just have no choice. Just like when you guys have a project that's due.
All right. Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us today and taking your time to read to us and share your books. Before we go, though, Mr. Enriquez, you want to lead us?
Yeah, so we kind of like to do our Raider version of the wave for you, because we're so excited that you came and shared some time with us. So are we ready? We're going to start off on this side. You guys know the wave, right?
Yeah.
Boys? Okay, we're going to start with me. Ready? Huh? What? Come on, Margarito, you're a basketball player. Let's do better than that. One more time. Evan, are you ready? We'll do it again. 1, on 3. Evan, 1, 2, 3. All right, that's good. Thanks again. Thank you so much for your time.
That was fantastic. Thank you again so much for inviting me into your school. It's it's a pleasure. Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
We'll see you tomorrow later.
You're the best author.
I know, right?